Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to rekindle that fire in your belly and step into life with clarity, purpose, and hopefully a whole lot more excitement. So today's interview is with Lisa Corduff, and for the Aussie women that are tuning in, I'm pretty sure you're going to know who this gorgeous woman is, but I'll hand it over to Lisa. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited about this interview. But for those that don't know who you are, Lisa, would you give us a little bit of background?
It's so funny that you think that everyone knows me. I would just be like, oh, that's nice. Don't really realize how many people those Facebook ads are going out to. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here too. I guess a little bit about me is that I started a Whole Foods blog back in 2012, maybe. At the end of 2012, I had two little kids. We just moved to Brisbane, a city where I knew no one. I'd studied a bit about nutrition, and I was just trying to work out how to start transitioning myself out of, lamingtons and finger buns and all the things to eating more from scratch. So I started to kind of cop on to that whole idea. I remember it was my sister who was going through some health stuff, and she was having she was waking up every morning at 2:00 in the morning with like heart palpitations and a bit of anxiety. And she saw a naturopath, and that naturopath said to her, look, you've actually got a really great diet, but can you just stop having that, literally a spoonful of low-fat vanilla ice cream after dinner and just see what happens? Yeah. And just like that, she stopped waking up. And we were in our 20s and just going, what do you mean? So we're not looking on the backs of packets of food for grams of fat anymore. We actually have to look at the ingredients, and it kind of just blew my mind. And then obviously when I had my own children, I was like, I don't really want to stuff this up, but I don't know what to do. And I'm not very much an all or nothing person. And I certainly don't have an hour a day to sit on a rock overlooking the ocean, to meditate, like that's not me. Can someone please just help me in my real life? And I couldn't find anyone else doing that. So I just started to share with people, and I have built an amazing community of women who are not so much into the perfectionism or are trying to break that because, these unrealistic standards that we're all holding ourselves to are just making us very sad and very tired. And I think because of my experience working in behavior change, I could just see that a different approach was required when it came to creating that sustainable behavior change that so many of us look for with food. And we kind of go all or nothing, and we commit to something, and then we fall off because our brains are like, go back to normal, we do things this way. And we do, and then we call ourselves failures. So the Small Steps movement is definitely about sustainable change, kindness to yourself. And so on the back of that, I guess I grew a business. I had 3 children in under 4 years. The eldest was still 3 when the third was born. And I decided to launch an online business, actually teaching all of this stuff when the youngest was about 10 weeks old, which was smart. But I kind of had this thought in my mind of, if this isn't an operating business, if this isn't earning me revenue by the time she's 1, I'm going to have to go back to work. Yeah. And so I kind of worked a lot in nap time and while they were asleep at night time, and created e-courses and memberships and podcasts. And I think a lot of women my community was mums. And so they'd been watching me build this business while I had young kids in a very real life, like not fancy, authentic kind of way. And then I had people asking me to help them do that. So what ended up happening is I've kind of got 2 businesses now, one where I run a mastermind for female entrepreneurs in Australia and teach people how to do video marketing and all this. And I run my Small Steps business as well, empowering people to make change one small step at a time. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Love it. I love it. And like a big piece of this whole show, we're up to series 3 now, is rather than I wanted to avoid I learnt this in a textbook, so here you are, this is what you should do. And instead just be talking to people that are living the message. And I just find there is so much more power in that, because it's it's in our everyday lives. It's in the bits that we trip up and fall over and start again, and how we get that mindset piece right, isn't it? That's really the pinnacle, the bit where it all starts.
It's everything.
Yeah.
And I remember back in, it was probably 2016. Yeah, 2016, I was invited to go and talk at the Pro Blogger Conference. I don't know if you've ever been there. And my topic was about taking imperfect action, because I could just see what stops people most in so many different areas of our lives is we think we've got to have it all sorted before we can kind of move forward, or before we can claim that we are doing something or we're good at something. And for me, it's always been about just taking imperfect action. Like the lessons are in the doing. Once we're in it, then we can learn from it and keep moving forward. But if we keep ourselves, just sort of standing back all the time, then it's like same goes with food. If you think you have to have some beautiful clean diet before you actually just try to have a crack at cooking a different meal, then you're missing the point.
Yeah. We need to look at our kids and just follow their example, because if a baby, if it fell over once and then gave up and never tried again, they would never walk. We start from day one, this kind of, falling on our face and then working out how to get up again. We just need to stick with that practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can learn so much from our children.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, if we can just put our focus on that mindset piece, because the women that I'm speaking to, there is almost this knowledge saturation. We have, everything is at our fingertips now, so we can just keep consuming more and more knowledge with this hope that we're suddenly going to cotton onto that one piece that brings it all together and suddenly life will be perfect. But it's just not happening. So we can do that for years. So I really want to just have that conversation around, first steps and the bits that trip us up and stop us from, moving forward. So can we start looking at that? You have some pieces on your blog that I grabbed, and it was the pieces that get you stuck. So can we dive into that?
Yeah, the stories that get you stuck. So I think what I started to learn about mindset. I mean, I'd been doing it for a little while. I don't think there's any better personal development than running your own business, especially when it involves visibility and vulnerability. I mean, you just have to move through so many things. Anyway, I have also had a husband who's had some really significant mental health struggles.
Right.
And what I realized quite quickly when things really sort of went quite pear-shaped was that no one else was going to be responsible for taking care of me amongst all of this. That was going to be something that I had to do. I got shingles after I'd moved our family down, and I was really not in a good way at all. And I just had this wake up moment of like, I'm choosing a lot of this. And I had that story in my head, like, I've got no choice. This is my life now. Everyone needs something from me. There's no room for me. And I was basically had that stuff on repeat in my head. And it was actually bullshit. Like, it was just stories that I had made up about my reality. And it was only when I kind of got a big wake-up call that, oh, hang on a minute. I can't wait for things to change around me. This is something that I need to take ownership of. This is my life that I'm responsible for. My happiness is on the line here. Mm-hmm. There can be stuff going on out there, but me inside, like, how can I make myself kind of unflappable and solid and keep giving to myself, even although I felt like there was quite a lot of energy leaks, from the people around me, 3 children, a husband who wasn't well. And so I realized that the piece for me was about where my attention was and what stories I was telling myself. And when I realized it was basically stuff I was making up, but I was really focused on it, like the whole there's no time for me, for example, I would just perpetuate that by filling up my time doing stuff for other people until I realized, well, I could tell myself a new story here. I could literally just drop that story because it's not true. Everyone's got the same amount of hours. I was choosing to give my time away to everybody else. So how about I now say, wow, I'm so grateful for, thinking about time for me. And I would just start to just experiment with what that even sounded like in my head, because all the voices would come in. It's like, well, if, you didn't have to blah, 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 blah. And those stories, that subconscious programming, it's just there and it's driving everything until we recognize that it's all sort of made up. And, that we can have one thought. That one thought could be, a kid is sick.
Yeah.
Great. Now I don't get my work done today. I have to be the one to take to the doctors. This is going to ruin my whole week. There's never any time for me. This is going to mean a bad night's sleep. Like that whole chatter. And it all happens at that sort of one level of thought. And then suddenly, if we actually go, hang on a minute, Lisa, you're choosing these thoughts.
Yeah.
These thoughts aren't real. And so you kind of go up here and you're like, oh, okay, so now I can just see that I'm thinking these thoughts. That's who I am. I'm not those thoughts. I'm the thinker of the thoughts. And you go, well, what's a different interpretation I could make right now? I'm so grateful I have a business that I do from home. I don't have to report into a boss. Yeah. I don't have to take sick leave. I can make this work. I can be here for my kid. That's cool. And I think when we realize that, when we can recognize and pull ourselves out of that thought pattern and see all the stories and see all the thoughts for what they are, which is just that chatter in our head, it gives us this tremendous power to shift everything for ourselves.
Yeah.
And you don't feel stuck anymore, because usually, like, we're never stuck. We're constant. We're energy, so we're constantly in motion.
Yeah.
But we can very much get trapped in thinking stuck thoughts.
Yeah.
So, and once again, it's my responsibility to recognize when that's happening and to choose when to shift myself. And sometimes, I don't shift myself out of feeling bad all the time, because sometimes really tough stuff happens and we have to be present to that and acknowledge it. But I think when I learned that most of our thoughts are just stories we're making up, it just allowed me this whole new, it was like a blank canvas to look at my life. What's actually really going on here? What is true versus what have I made up and now believe as truth?
Yeah.
So it kind of just exploded everything for me, and it gave me a lot more power, and I could be a lot more intentional with where I was focusing my attention.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes 100% sense. And, we speak the same language, so I love it. And that it's so much of what we talk about is really simple. It's not necessarily easy and it takes some commitment, but it is really simple. And we do have absolute choice in every decision that we're making and how we decide to look at whatever scenario is in front of us. And, something that we were talking about earlier today is really this is the ultimate gift, to be able to pass on to our kids if they understand that they have choice.
But you know what? I reckon there would have been a time of my life where if someone had told me I had choice, I would have wanted to just do that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You don't understand my life.
Yeah.
You don't understand what I'm dealing with here. There is no choice about it.
Yeah.
But that was just giving all of my power away.
Yes.
I was so resistant to it, because the thought that anything could change was almost just like, what?
Yeah.
I can't help that I'm breastfeeding a baby and have 2 toddlers and have a business. And, well, you could stop breastfeeding if you wanted to. You could slow right down on the business if you wanted to. You could even put your toddlers up for adoption if you wanted to. But do you know what I'm like? I totally agree with you, except I found it a confronting thing. And I think that's because I was comfortable in victimhood.
Yeah.
I was comfortable in it because nothing was required of me in victimhood. I could just kind of be like, well, my husband's not well, 3 kids. And then it's a safe place to be.
Yeah.
And when you start to realize, oh, hang on a minute, I'm creating all of this, then suddenly it's sort of like, well, oh goodness, what do I have to do about it then? I don't know. And that's when like people like you come in and people, when we start to sort of seek out different ways of literally being, because it was interesting what you said in the beginning, and I'm just going to totally jump here.
That's all right.
But you were saying how we read all the information, you know, we think that we can literally do ourselves out of, you know, a different result. If I can read this book, or if I can do that course, or if I can, you know, just get up every day at 5:30 and exercise like that person I follow, then I will have this different life. I'll be, you know, I'll be healthy and well and, you know, balanced, and I'll have that career that I want. I just need to do things differently. And we're constantly wanting to do differently and to have this result. But there's, you know, what I have been learning a lot about is the role of identity in all this. Who are you being?
Yeah.
And who is that person? And then, like, you can't have a different result unless you literally change who you are being. I remember it so clearly. I remember reading Louise Hay for the first time. She was like my entry point into a lot of stuff. And I think I only had the 2 kids at that time. And I realized that a big problem for me was chaos and like house a mess, just not feeling at all in control of anything in my life. And I realized that that was always going to be the case if I was being chaotic. So I could do things differently. I could set up a weekly schedule and keep on top of all the things and do the skirting boards and blah, 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 blah. But it was always going to fail because at my identity level, I was still being chaotic in my approach to things and who I was. Like that was the identity I had as like Lisa Chaos Corduff. And it's not until we change at that level that we will naturally start to do things differently. So if I choose to be calm and organized, well, if I'm Lisa Calm Corduff, well, she just does things differently to Lisa Chaos Corduff. So who are we being to get the result that we want is a question that I ask myself all the time now.
Yep.
And in loads of different areas of my life, and motherhood especially.
Yeah.
You know, business as well, all sorts of things, because I can see now I need to be the person to do things differently to get the different result, not just do things differently. Like if I just get that 90-day planner and tick it off every day, then I'll have a different result. No, because if I'm not being someone committed to my goals, there's no kind of point. So I encourage, you know, everyone watching, who are you being at like every single day, or what's that story you've got in your head about your identity and who you are? That is going to have a much bigger impact on whether you've read all the things and are this like information crazy person.
Yeah. And I mean, we can wear different hats. We have to, I mean, I wear different hats, you know, like you, I do the majority of my work from home. I'm currently in my living room and my dog is down there snoring. I hope to goodness no one, he's made appearances in all sorts of different interviews throughout this show. But, you know, I know that if I get into my morning routine and I actually get dressed and maybe put on some mascara and am as if I'm going out to work, it completely changes the way I show up to the work that I'm doing at home. Nobody else might see me, but it doesn't matter because it is part of that just being in that space.
Right. And it's quite transformative when like even just being someone who has choice, like being someone as opposed to being a victim
Yep.
of your circumstances, when really your circumstances are just a validation or an expression of you on the inside. And that changes, that once again, that was a huge revelation for me, that my inside world is literally creating my outside world. And like you just choosing in that moment to be a serious businesswoman, well, of course that person then puts on some lippy and some fresh earrings or whatever, and does things differently. But if you chose that identity of stay at home and work, I procrastinate, I'm a definite procrastinator, and we're the identity of someone who never gets anything finished, well then that's what you'll do, things that support that identity. It's all happening at a subconscious level.
Yeah. And once again, I go back to having, I have my three older ones are all, teenagers and leaving home. But even when they were younger, I endlessly have that conversation around choice and who you want to be. So it might be the horror over having to do a presentation, that whole fear of public speaking. And it's like, I'm introverted and I can't. And, it's like, well, you can. You need to make a choice. You can choose not to and to tell yourself you can't, or you can choose to say, actually, I'm going to do an awesome job of this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's like that thing. I'm so conscious of words around my kids. Mine are 8, 6, and 4, and it's not about being good or things like that. I always am just like, be awesome.
Yeah.
And whatever that means for them, great. But literally, just think about just being awesome.
Yeah.
The most awesome version of you. And it's kind of like a little bit of a thing. You're like, yes, Mum, I'll be awesome.
I'm awesome. So we like the theme of this has become about that choice. So that idea is there. We've spoken of it. But what are the steps from, okay, so at the moment, I'm feeling in a rut at the moment. I'm feeling like every afternoon at 4:00, I'm bellowing at the kids because I'm so frustrated that they won't take their lunchbox, like whatever that space is that whoever is listening to this needs to hear. What are the steps from there to going, okay, I'm going to make a choice about this?
Everyone has their different journeys, their different challenges, their different context that they're living within. But I just refuse to accept that particular stages of life mean I have to feel like poop. And the particular season that I've been going through lately has been challenging me because I'm a naturally quite high vibe, optimistic, energetic person. I'm full of ideas. A song can get me into a good mood if I'm feeling bad. But I have found myself in a situation that was a constant kind of pull down on that. And I needed to work out how to recognize that myself as Lisa outside of the context in which I was living. And I think, this goes to choice because this was my choice every day, the way that I exercised it, living, with someone with mental health challenges and 3 little children, was to think every day, what would make me feel good today? Like literally, like just what would be something that would make me feel good? And it was oftentimes just getting up and I'd do a 5-minute yoga. Like I'd just Google quick yoga on YouTube and I would do that and that would just get me vibing. And that was all I had to do. Other days I thought, I really need to get out of the house. So I'd work from a cafe. Yeah. I would think, because what I realized was, this whole vibration thing that was the one thing that I could be responsible for. And no one else needed to lift me up.
Yeah.
I lifted myself up. I found ways to feel good no matter what was going on around me, because that's what I could choose. And for sure, oh my gosh, I have been on my knees. I have been all the tears. It has been by far the most difficult time of my life, without a doubt. But I would always recognize I had a choice about where I was placing my attention and whether it was time for that attention to shift somewhere else. And the way that I could do that would be to just think, like, what would make me feel good right now? Sometimes it would be going live on Facebook, because I got a natural high from that. Sometimes it would be just saying to the kids, have your baths and showers, or no baths and showers tonight, get into your jammies, let's just have a movie night on the couch during the week. There is happiness and fulfillment and joy everywhere if we are looking for it. And we have a choice about that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a choice about certain things, and mostly that's always to do with other people. But then ultimately, you have a choice to stay or go.
Yeah.
You have a choice about the amount of attention and energy you place. You have a choice about the amount of caretaking you do. In the Small Steps membership, we have lots of fixers. We have lots of women who just want to make everything right for their family. They're there to learn about food. They're there to learn about, how to reduce their overwhelm. And they're naturally fixers and caretakers. They've recognized the role. They want to play the role. And if we aren't making a choice about, like, literally this morning, there was a conversation about with a woman who was saying that she literally hasn't been able to go out to breakfast with a friend or anything. Her daughter's 9, because her daughter has some separation anxiety. And I'm like, well, it is a choice, and I definitely don't diminish how difficult that must be at all. And I'm not a doctor or anything, but how much longer can you continue to make that choice and be depleted and not be looking for solutions to support you? How long do we do that for? And I think we all come through. I mean, your kids are way older than mine, but I already feel it like seasons.
Yeah.
So nothing lasts forever, but every day I can still feel good.
Yeah.
Like, there's always a way. And if that's where we place our attention, and if that's what we make our choice.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And this is conversation, whether it's that separation anxiety conversation or conversations around anxiety itself. It's always difficult to walk into that without making somebody feel like perhaps they're being judged. But I'm just going to address this from my own experience with 2 teenage girls and the absolutely epidemic proportions of anxiety in our community now, particularly in our teenage girls, but across the board. And we've had that in this house. And I come at it very much from there are things that you can do to make this better. And every time you go into that place, you are making a choice. And if you choose to sit and stare at a device for hours, you are going to feed that anxiety. If you choose to go out for a walk, if you choose to push through an uncomfortable situation at school with love and with support, you will learn to move through that anxiety. And I know that there's different levels of anxiety, and this is not a judgment piece, but there is a line between being permissive of behaviour and using it as an excuse, and actually coming up with choices about how to move through it.
I think that's hugely powerful. Yeah. And, in the thread when we were talking about it, someone said they'd been to an anxiety seminar, and they said that their advice was to help your children just enough. So, you know, if we do come in that caretaker role and they rely on us for everything, I mean, that's not the role of parent, really. It's at some, you know, we've got to shift that. And I think that's hugely empowering what you do for your kids. My daughter's 6 and has started grade 1 this year and was unable to get out of the car. I mean, she just, it came out of nowhere and I didn't know really what to do. And I kept thinking, though, that this is also part of her journey. But this is not something, like, she's not broken. This is something that's happening. You know, she's seeing a psychologist, she's had chiro, osteo, got an amazing energy healer who's, you know, doing things. And I can be there as the person to facilitate that, but also hold the space for her to be well and okay, and come in with reassurance and love and support. But, you know, it got to the point where it's like, I love you and today is a school day.
Yeah.
You know, I love you and I'll see you later. Today is a school day, so this is what's happening. And now we had 3 days this week where there was no tears at drop off. And, you know, like, empowering our kids to know it's okay to feel whatever they're feeling and not trying to take away from that at all, but also giving them the tools. I think that's huge. Yeah.
And just that constant reinforcement that, you know, every decision is a choice. I think I've said it before, but I think it's the ultimate gift that we can give our kids. Yeah, so good. So good to hear that from a mum of, like, teenagers and kids pass through all of this stuff. I'm like, okay, good, I'm on the right track. Yeah, it absolutely is. And we've been through that, you know, really, really high stress of year 11 and year 12 and things, you know, absolutely hitting the skids and then trying to pick them back up again. And, you know, it's a roller coaster. There's no shying away from that. And some kids go through it much more smoothly than others. But my experience and my observation is that those pressures and that anxiety and that stress is just getting higher and higher and higher. So from external sources. So if we can empower our kids with those tools from a much earlier age, in that, you know, you have a choice. You actually have a choice just to ignore that essay and not get it done, and the consequences at school are going to be what they're going to be, or you can choose to put in effort and feel proud of it. You actually have that choice. Yeah. And it's so powerful. Like, but I think we forget, like, life is choice, and everything's interpretation too. Yeah. You know, there's so much. That's the whole sort of stories piece as well. We can get ourselves caught up in all of these things that we choose to believe about ourselves. And then if you're saying to your child, you actually have a choice here, that gives them the opportunity, like, and they sort of step up and into the challenge to create a whole new story for themselves. Because, you know, we believe our stories. I just am like, what's a story that serves me today? Yeah. And I'm awesome and I'm trying my best, even although I sometimes feel like everything's falling apart. I was going to choose to tell myself the story. Like, you are doing your best. Yeah. And hugely powerful to create different interpretations based on the fact that we have choice. And how exciting and how thrilling to get into the idea of stepping into being who you want to be. I just, you know, like I do this little exercise, and I've actually mentioned it in another interview, but, you know, I sort of say to the mums that I work with, imagine you just fell out of the sky butt naked. There's no past to define you, no pre-presumed future. You know, what would you wear if you didn't care what anyone else thought? Who would you be? What would you do? What would you have? You know, you can, there is no reason why you can't completely recreate who you are. Literally every single day. Yeah. But don't you reckon that we don't give ourselves those line in the sand moments enough? No, absolutely. Have to leave my family. Like, anytime I get some time away, it's just like, oh, all these epiphanies just sort of dropping, and I haven't given myself a chance to kind of integrate the changes until I literally sort of step away and can recognize that it's happened. Yeah. And I have a neighbour whose child is 7 and has 4-year-old twins. She's never had a night away from her children. Yeah.
And that to me, that just feels like I actually feel pain, because I know how valuable those times are for me, to kind of integrate everything, and to give myself that line in the sand moment to come back and be like, okay, it's time. We established a new routine about what happens to lunch boxes when you come home after school, or whatever it is. Sometimes just those tiny little things, you need to step away and then to be able to see what needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look at this from a work perspective. If you are an entrepreneur and you work from home, or whether you go to an office and work, it is critical that you take time out and that you stop, so that you can reflect on what's going on and take that step back and have a clearer view. But we don't apply that same logic to the job of being a mum. And it's the same thing. You need to be able to step out of it to really see what's going on. Otherwise, it's just you're in that, I call it the hamster wheel effect. Every day you're just kind of doing the same routine and the same stuff, and until you step out of that, it's really hard to see the big picture, what's really going on.
100%. And we see this all the time in the Small Steps membership. People are like, okay, I'm kind of doing the food now. It's working. I found these simple recipes. I can get this whole food stuff up on the table. But now I'm just bored. And it's time for a change, but I don't want to completely reinvent the wheel. And it's like, well, that's okay, because you can just take small steps. Just include one new thing a week. But sometimes we just need to shake things up a little bit. And I find getting away helpful, but sometimes we need to find ways to make that happen in our everyday life, because not everyone gets the opportunity.
Yeah, but that priority of self and giving yourself a break, I like to think about this like, that it's that role model thing, and what are we making being a woman look like? What are we making being a mum look like? Are we saying that what I am role modeling for you is that you are in servitude 100% of the time, and you're not allowed to have time for yourself, and you don't take care of yourself because everybody else is more important than you? Is that really the message we want to pass on?
No way. And I've thought about that. A lot, because I remember going to New York, and when they were little, and the youngest was probably about, I think she was like 16 months, and I cried all the way, like from Brisbane to Sydney, all the way through customs. Like I just couldn't stop crying. Like, what have I done? What am I actually doing here? Leaving my children? What mother does this? And you know what? A mother who is following her dreams, and a mother who's showing her daughters that you can be a mum, you can still do really cool stuff in the world. I'm, showing them that the world is much bigger than our home, and that people who you love come back. And, all sorts of things. Like, there's just so many beautiful lessons that my children are learning, having a mum who is doing her thing, and who does prioritize herself. And while it's not easy, and sometimes those thoughts can kind of come in, they're only young ones, blah blah blah. I mean, this is building the story of their life. All our choices are their story, and so that's a powerful thing. I don't want, like my daughter once said to me, I don't think I want to be a mum. It feels a bit too hard. It seems really hard. And I thought, okay, now I need to just get conscious of me being on the go all the time. Or that was, at a time where I was really go, go, go. Come on, guys, in the car. And then I thought, well, being a mum is awesome. Best thing ever. I don't want her to think that I'm struggling through this, or that it's heavy. So I thought, okay, well, it just gave me a point to reflect and think, what are they seeing here? And how is this building the story for them?
Time to inject a bit of fun.
Yes. Yeah. Put on a bit of Michael Jackson, dance around the house.
Bit of moonwalking.
In the undies, pants off. Let's do this.
Love it. Love it. I can't believe we've just about come to the end of our time. Something I'd love to ask you, because I'm a big believer in how we start the day sets the tone for the day. So on your ideal day, how do you like to start the day?
I love self-hypnosis. So the first thing that I do when I wake up is listen to a self-hypnosis.
Yep.
I have the Harmony app and I love it. It's about 20 minutes and it just sets me up for it's my thing. And then I will also do a little 10-minute yoga and be dressed before the kids wake up. So that's what makes me feel on top of things before I even start the actual.
Just making a little note there. I haven't heard of that, so I'll put a link to it in your email. The Harmony app. Yeah, that's awesome.
I just know that everything's happening at a subconscious level, and so to be able to take ourselves into hypnosis and then just do a visualization or work through things or let some things go and then come out of it. For me, I feel completely energized. I know that I'm working with my subconscious in a way that is actually creating shifts, because we can talk about this stuff all we want, but unless we're actually shifting things at that subconscious identity level, like we're literally kind of going there, then we're just going to keep repeating the same patterns. So I love listening to podcasts about all of that stuff. I love learning about our brain and how it's how we can help it move us through things faster.
Awesome. Yeah. Love it. In the last series of this show, it was the big foodie series, and so I was talking to all these foodie gurus, and I thought at the beginning of the series, what's going to be a great question that I can ask everybody the same thing? And I thought, well, what do you have for breakfast? And every speaker said eggs. It was hilarious. By the time I got to the end of it, I was like, oh my gosh, somebody's got to say something other than eggs, but they didn't. All 23 speakers. It was a cracker. It was an absolute cracker. In the last interview, I said, right, that's it. I'm buying shares. I'm going out.
So now you've got all these hundreds of thousands of women who watch the summit just going, oh, it's eggs.
Yeah. I just absolutely boosted the egg industry in Australia out of sight. It was great.
That's awesome.
So I think with this one, we're going to get some different answers, and which is golden. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for an awesome conversation, Lisa, and thanks for being part of this series.
My absolute pleasure. I definitely hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it's great. Loved it. Thanks so much. All right, bye.